kind of all became very natural for me because I grew up overseas. So
Mhm.
hence the third culture kid
Yeah,
moniker,
right.
which is basically a child that grows up in a culture that's not their own. And
Mhm.
so I grew up in both Guyana, South America, and then Pakistan.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because my dad worked for a company that built hydroelectric dams and irrigation systems
Oh, wow.
for developing countries.
Uh-huh.
So we would basically go over there while the project was happening. Um, and, as a kid, you don't know any different. You
Right.
don't think that anything's strange about this. And so I went to school with kids from all over the world,
Yeah.
everywhere that you could
Mhm.
imagine.
Mhm.
And, you don't worry about someone's skin color, their religious affiliation, what they eat, none of that. You just want to have fun and get
Right.
together and enjoy and play in the sandbox or whatever.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I chat about stories and creativity in all different styles and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and my goal is to promote what Dale Carnegie stated in his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He said, instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. It's my firm belief that the goal of most creative people is to try to understand themselves and others. That's what makes artwork of all kinds so compelling. But more than that, the personal stories of my guests promote understanding as well. Roger C. Schenck, a cognitive scientist, said, human beings are not ideally set up to understand logic. They are ideally set up to understand stories. It's my hope that Story Power will help us understand each other better by sharing the stories of my guests. Hello, Story Power listeners. Today is episode 120, and I'm talking to Kirsten Rudberg. Did I say that correctly?
Rudberg, but that is okay. Both first
Rudberg.
and last are challenging to pronounce. So
I want to make sure I say names correctly. So, Kirsten, and you and I tried to get together some months back, but then you got COVID and other things happened, and so I'm so glad that we're getting together today. So, welcome to Story Power.
thank you so much. I'm excited finally that the fates intervened and we can meet and hang out and talk.
Yeah, really, because there's a lot to talk about. You have a very interesting uh background and education. I religious studies was one of my majors. One of my degrees actually. And so the fact that you have an MDiv, which is Masters of Divinity, and other related kinds of educational background, that's very interesting to me. And when I was reading your Podmatch profile, I loved that you said you were a pantheist. Is that how you say it? Pantheist?
Panentheist.
Panentheist, yes. So, do you want to maybe tell a little bit about? Also, I loved that you said that you were a third culture kid. So, do you want to talk about some of those things?
Sure, yeah. I'm a panentheist. I went to seminary, excuse me, and got my master's of divinity without a religion.
Hmm.
So when I walked in, everybody else in my cohort, they were Lutheran or Methodist or
Hmm.
Presbyterian or what have you. And I didn't ascribe to any religion. And that's probably because I grew up overseas and I've just seen so much of the world.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and, it did bother me that there were a couple Unitarians there as well. Bothered me that I didn't have a religion. I was kind of the odd duck, but that's okay. And then as seminary went on and my cohort kind of evolved through this process of their education, a few of them shifted and they became panentheists. And then other people left the Christian faith. And it was really this fascinating thing to observe everybody as they went through this process of getting their masters of divinities. And it really shakes up your life
Mm-hmm.
and reformats everything kind of that you think about the world, really shifts your idea of your place in the world. And so, I'd never heard of panentheism, but once these other two people became panentheists, I started digging into it and I thought, oh my gosh, that's who I am. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily a nature based religion, but it's the idea that all things are sacred and that everything
Mm-hmm.
is validity and that everything is conscious, the
Mm-hmm.
rocks, the trees, the sky, the wind, that everything is co-creating with us, that wants to be in harmony with us, and that it wants a conversation with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, that's kind of what I've been feeling all along, and I finally found it.
Yes.
But that I would say that kind of all became very natural for me because I grew up overseas. So
Mm-hmm.
hence the third culture kid
Yeah,
moniker,
right.
which is basically a child that grows up in a culture that's not their own. And
Mm-hmm.
so I grew up in both Guyana, South America, and then Pakistan,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because my dad worked for a company that built hydroelectric dams and irrigation systems
Oh, wow.
for developing countries.
Uh-huh.
So we would basically go over there while the project was happening. Um, and, as a kid, you don't know any different. You
Right.
don't think that anything's strange about this. And so I went to school with kids from all over the world,
Yeah.
everywhere that you could
Mm-hmm.
imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And, you don't worry about someone's skin color, their religious affiliation, what they eat, none of that. You just want to have fun and get
Right.
together and enjoy and play in the sandbox or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I came back to the States, I'm living my life, I'm in seminary, and someone hears my story and they say, oh, you're a third culture kid. And I said, what? And they're like, there's a wiki on you. And I thought, no way. What are you talking about? So immediately I looked it up. And yes, there is a wiki. They've done psychological studies on kids who grew up in cultures that are not their own. And basically, I mean, the gist is that you're more open about the world, more
Mm-hmm.
curious,
Mm-hmm.
more like expansive, more generous, and welcoming the stranger, I guess. I mean, I'm just paraphrasing here, but it's just an attitude towards the world or position towards the world that's more positive, that's more
Mm-hmm.
hopeful.
Yes, I love that. I didn't live outside the United States, but we moved a lot when
Okay.
I was a kid. And small towns, big cities, and and then now I live a mile from the border of Mexico and I taught at a border school and yeah, and so it's not exactly the same. It's not I'm not a third world kid, but then Barry and I took a trip circumnavigating the globe in 1996 and though travel is one of those things that kind of helps you do that, open up a little bit. So, yeah, and then I understand that whole when you go to I didn't go to seminary, but when I took all my classes for religious studies, it was at a Christian college and I was the only woman. It was in the 70s. I was the only woman in the program. And I took it because I wanted to know about the stories of those ancient peoples. That was my goal. I wasn't going to become a minister in the church or anything because women weren't ministers at that time in the church that I grew up in. And there were men who would come to me and, thump the Bible at me and say, you need to change your major. And I'm like, who are you to tell me what to do? finally, finally, after I don't know how long, in fact, I've kind of blocked that whole thing out of my brain. They got the message. Oh, she's not going to change her mind. I guess we can stop talking to her now. But yes, so I had that kind of same a similar experience of it wasn't that my faith was shaken, which happened to some people. Their faith in God was shaken. I didn't have that experience, but I did have the experience of, the church that I grew up in, and maybe even Christianity, is not really exactly how I feel about the world. So, when we left, my husband and I when I'm older than him. So when he graduated, because I added theater after that, and that's an opening kind of thing too. We did attend church for a while, but it just came to the point where we realized, oh, this is too confining. I don't know if other people in your cohort felt that way, but that's how I felt. And we read all these books, by Deepak Chopra and Gary Zukav and on and on and on. Greg Braden, who are now, big teachers, and Carolyn Mays and, Marianne Williamson. And it was like, oh, wow, this is really eye opening. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean it isn't my story to tell, but I certainly through my own podcast, the first people I interviewed were people from my cohort for my podcast. So I
Yeah.
got to catch up with them and see what was going on in their lives. And it was shocking to me. You know, uh, what was really interesting was about four couples divorced through the process of going through seminary.
Oh,
So the couples weren't in seminary together,
uh-huh.
but that journey through seminary shifted and changed people's lives so much that they realized their marriages were no longer working. And
Mm-hmm.
then gosh, multiple people in my cohort, as I said, were no longer Christian. And it's because, seminary, they really do a good job of deconstructing
Mm-hmm.
everything. And yes, we didn't all take the same classes, but certainly enough of us took the same classes. And that deconstruction process, relearning kind of everything, relearning the Bible, relearning,
Mm-hmm.
like doing deeper dives into things,
Mm-hmm.
helped some of them, I guess you could say, to understand that maybe they needed to take a step back
Mm-hmm.
and rethink their relationship to their religion,
Mm-hmm.
just what it meant to be a Christian. What does it mean to be a Christian in today's world when that
Mm-hmm.
word sometimes comes with a lot of baggage? And
Mm-hmm.
I think several of them just thought, you know what, I need to reorient myself. I'm going to step away from Christianity because I want to serve the world in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps being a Christian does not allow me to do that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, it was,
Yeah.
I've talked to multiple of them, and those processes of going through really destroyed their souls and caused a lot of heartbreak and heartache. And it
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like walking through the valley of the shadow of death for them
Mm-hmm.
because they were having to figure out
Mm-hmm.
how to be in the world
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, I mean, I did do some of that. I thought that it was very interesting. All of the documents that were excluded from the Bible, and the different theologies that, were out there, that, the I suppose it was the Catholic Church actually that sort of did this, took those and said, "Oh no, we're not even gonna talk about that theology." And so that kind of thing was not really, it didn't shake my soul so much, but what it did was it made me go, "Oh, we should." My dad always used to say this, you need to question everything. So I hadn't really been questioning that, you know, my belief in the Bible or in the church that I grew up in, which is kind of a weird one. It's related, well, actually, it's the original, but they're called Community of Christ now, and it's related to the Mormon Church. And weird mythology in that religion. And yeah, so all of that, it was like, oh, just opening up my mind to different possibilities. And especially when, I was taking classes about world religions, and seeing the similarities in the philosophies of them, that, love is the main thing. And most religions have that as their main tenet, so but it also affected my life on the outside because, there were people who, like, for example, I tried to be the president of my house. We didn't have sororities. We had women's houses and men's houses at the college I went to. And they wouldn't approve me because, they asked me a question like, okay, if some girl comes in and she's drunk, what do you do? Well, of course the answer is you're supposed to turn her in. No, that's not how I was raised. So what I said was, well, I think I'd try to find out why she was drinking. Oh, not the right answer. So that was kind of a whole, another like aspect because all the girls wanted me to be their house president and they were really ticked off that I didn't get approved. So, oh, drama, drama. But yeah, but I've always thought it would be interesting to live outside the United States, especially since we took that trip around the world. So it must have been a little bit of a shock when you came back, when you came
Oh,
to the
yeah.
United States.
Yeah, yeah.
Culture
Yeah,
shock.
because culture shock, exactly. And it wasn't until I got to seminary and started unpacking a bunch of stuff that I realized most likely that my first great heartbreak was coming back to the States and realizing that the world was not, especially the world of kids, right, is
Mm.
not as accepting and inclusive and generous as it was overseas.
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with Illinois or, this is the 70s, right? Late 70s, early
Mhm.
80s. And,
Mhm.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but it was just a culture shock for me coming
Mhm.
back to a place just outside of Chicago, suburban Chicago, Illinois, and all of a sudden what you brought in your lunchbox mattered, what you brought to school as far as clothing, pencils, pens, everything. It was all of a sudden a very consumerist mindset.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you weren't cool if you didn't have the right clothes. You
Mhm.
weren't
Mhm.
cool if you didn't have this TV or that TV. And I essentially grew up without a TV, quite honestly.
Mhm. Mhm.
My mom just when we came back to the States didn't pay for cable, didn't I mean, we didn't really watch TV in my house. There was a lot of
Mhm.
reading going on.
Mhm.
And I tell people this is funny. My mom also sent us to school at that suburban school the first day in Pakistani clothing, so that didn't help my social cachet. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think she'd
Mhm.
had time to go shopping for us or whatever, but there's that obligatory first day of school photo, and
Mhm.
there
Mhm.
I am in my Pakistani clothing, and I thought, oh dear, it all went downhill after that. So yeah, it broke my heart. All of a sudden I was struggling to figure out what does this mean? I don't understand any of these social mores, all these
Mhm.
ways of talking to people. It's everything so different. And it was such a shock and so devastating for me, just mentally, psychologically, emotionally as a kid, that I had to do fourth grade again and had to repeat fourth grade. I just couldn't adjust.
Yeah.
Um, I was just too kind of destroyed by the whole process of trying to come back and fit into the kind of the
Mhm.
cookie cutter lifestyle that kind of
Mhm.
suburbia demands.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and actually just went back and spent time taking care of my mother last year for about 6 months. The home I grew up in, the home we came back to Pakistan to, and went out in the community, joined the gym and stuff. And gosh, if that suburbia mentality isn't still there.
Mhm. Yes, I wish we could break out of that, and maybe we are, with all the chaos going on right now, because it's making us look at, "Hey, what what have we been doing?" You know? Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah. I just, I think there's a time to wake up. I think a lot of people go through their lives sleeping just
mhm,
because it's easier to. It's easier not to engage with the world. It's easier
mhm,
not to have difficult conversations. It's easier to kind of willfully ignore the challenging or the heartbreaking things in the world. But at
mhm,
some point, one of my prayers is that people will wake up a little bit more and become more engaged with
mhm,
what's going on around them, so that they can maybe more thoughtfully participate in the world or more thoughtfully lift other people up, or
mhm,
or
mhm,
maybe stop scrolling to buy a new handbag and
mhm,
instead figure out what you can do locally for your local soup
mhm.
kitchen or what have you. So
Y
yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yes, Barry and I now are talking about because he's retired and we're going to be getting rid of some of our debt. And then I said, I would like it if we picked some charities and just gave $10 or $20 a month to each of those. And he said, yeah, I like that idea. So, I mean, that's just one thing that you can do. But yeah, um, I think sometimes people are afraid that if they go and examine their belief system or their value system, that they're going to go to this dark place and then they're never going to come out again.
Oh, totally. There's a lot, especially on my podcast. I had no idea because my second question in my podcast is always did you grow up in a religious household? And gosh, the hornet's nests that question opens is I was not prepared for that. And a lot of people do not have a positive relationship, a beautiful relationship with the religion that they grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
It's very traumatic for them to revisit
Yeah.
those memories. And one of the things that a lot of people have said over and over is, as a child, the most horrific thing that scarred me forever and terrified me was that I was already bad and
Mm-hmm.
that I was never going to be good and that I was just, unless
Mm-hmm.
I lived this austere life of never putting one toe out of step, I was going to hell and
Mm-hmm.
there was no choice. And the trauma that they speak of is so visceral, even still as adults. Their hearts are still broken. And so I don't blame them for turning away from a belief system or a religion that tells them, even as children, they aren't precious and can do no wrong.
Right. Yeah.
It's quite a thing to hold a child in terror,
Mm-hmm.
to towing right and wrong. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is what some of these religions all over the world, that's their way of control, right? It's their way of
Mm-hmm.
keeping people in line. And that kind of indoctrination starts as children,
Mm-hmm.
that you will suffer for all eternity, which is the antithesis, of course, of what various prophets and gods throughout history,
Mm-hmm.
some of them have said, which is, a place like hell doesn't exist. Really, it's all about love and,
Mm-hmm.
loving yourself, but also being of service and loving your neighbor. And at the
Mm-hmm.
end, it's all about love. It's all about love,
Mm-hmm.
love, love, love. But somehow that's gotten lost
Yeah.
in people's desire to control and desire to
Yes.
have power, unfortunately.
I
Yeah, it's a
know.
slippery slope. I think once, for a lot of humans, once you get that taste of power or being able to wield influence over others, you just desire more and it becomes a hunger.
Mm-hmm.
And then, after that, all bets are off to how dark and how deep you will go.
Yeah, really. Oh, that's true. So I have two or three things to say about that. One is I was very fortunate to grow up with a father who just believed that love was it and you question everything and the doctrines of the church weren't necessarily true and you had to find your own way. And he had this deeply spiritual inner life, but he was an introvert and he didn't talk about it a whole lot. But you could see it in the way he interacted with other people. So questioning the church doctrine was first and foremost. And then the other thing was when I was in my classes, and I do not remember exactly when this happened, I realized, oh, religion's all about control, controlling people. And maybe that was the kind of the beginning of going my own path away from the church that I grew up in. And then it's been maybe 5 or 6 years. I started studying A Course in Miracles, and that's one of my absolute favorite things in there is love is all that love is the only thing that's real. Nothing else is real. And I remind myself of that all the time. Fear's not real. I mean, yes, people feel fear and they get caught up in it and it go down these terrible spirals, but it's not real. It's an illusion. Love is the only thing that's real. So I have to remind myself of that really often when I want to go, what a stupid idiot. Oh, wait a minute. Love's the only thing that's real, and they're a mirror for me. So what am I supposed to be learning from this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, it you can think of love as being at the bedrock of everything, right? It
Mhm,
is what
mhm,
shapes and forms this universe, what the universe is built of or what it's
mhm,
constructed of, the reality that we're in.
mhm,
And it's just waiting for all of us to catch up to understanding that. But I also think that it needs to start, and this is so trite, and I hate saying it, but with self-love. And unless we can love
mhm,
ourselves unconditionally, I mean, it's going to be impossible to do anything else.
mhm, mhm,
Because I'm with a dear friend now. I'm house sitting for her, and she's done the whole course in miracles.
mhm,
And she's all about love unconditionally. That's it. End of story. That
mhm,
is it. At the end of the day, the only thing, love unconditionally. But she is in a relationship with someone that is where he treats her really badly.
mhm,
And the reason she doesn't leave him or she doesn't you know, kind of assert herself is because she has taken it to no, I need to love him unconditionally. That
mhm,
is it. And
mhm,
I thought, when do you love yourself unconditionally so that you get out of
mhm,
this relationship? But that,
mhm,
she's doesn't want to do that.
mhm,
It's better to love unconditionally outward
mhm.
versus turn it inward.
Yeah. Yes, and that's kind of been a whole lifelong thing for me is to learn to love myself. And because it's difficult to be there for other people if you're this is a really stupid way to say it, but I've heard this before. If your cup is empty, what do you have to give to other people? You don't. You don't have anything. So, loving yourself. And it's still a lifelong process. I'm still working on that. But I do feel so much better about myself than I did when I was young. And part of that whole process of doing the religious studies was all was a component of learning to go, you can't tell me what to do because I know this is right for me. I'm loving myself by doing this thing that you, for some reason, think you have a right to tell me what to do. And so, and I think I kind of got that from my dad was, don't let other people tell you what to do. Do what's right for you. So, um, yeah, he was really good at knowing what each of us children needed. And he would tell us those things. So yes. So what are you do? You're house sitting for someone. You were living in when we were going to get together before. You were living in New Mexico, but you have a new job. So do you want to talk about what you're doing now?
Oh yeah, it's so not glamorous. So one of the things you need to know about me is, and I don't know if this is because I've grown up overseas, but I it probably is because I've grown up overseas. I love the world and I'm endlessly curious. I'm
Mm-hmm.
endlessly intrigued by the stranger, by
Mm-hmm.
adventure. And so I've had a very unconventional lifestyle. I went to college, went for gosh, after college, went to University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and then moved to the West Coast and lived in Bellingham and Portland for a very long time.
I lived in
And just
Portland.
what?
I lived in Portland.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I am a peripatetic person, which means that I like to travel a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
always have had jobs where I could have a maximum flexibility. So restaurants, coffee shops,
Mm-hmm.
whatever I could do, wherever I could do. So in Portland, I lived there for about a little over 20 years. And
Mm-hmm.
every few years, I would leave for 3 or 4 months and
Mm-hmm.
go and have an adventure somewhere else. So, for example, I lived at the Oregon coast for 4 months one
Mm-hmm.
year. A
Mm-hmm.
couple of years later, I went and I moved back to Chicago and spent like 5 months with my
Mm-hmm.
family and working downtown on the river,
Mm-hmm.
downtown Chicago. A few years after that, I went and to Palm Beach Gardens and lived there for a few months to help my friend get through her Parkinson's surgery. And then
Mm-hmm.
a few years after that, I went and spent several months walking the Camino in Europe. And so
Mhm,
I
mhm,
have to leave wherever I am. Otherwise, I go stir crazy. And
mhm,
frankly, in Santa Fe, that was the longest time I'd spent without leaving to go do something. It was about 7 or 8 years. That's the longest I've ever gone. But then last year, I was going through seminary, of course, when I was in
mhm,
Santa Fe and
mhm,
kind of working and then not working, just in school. And then, of course, I moved back home to Chicago, outside Chicago, to be with my mother last year.
mhm,
I'm the one who can do that because I have no children. I'm not married.
mhm,
I
mhm,
have the most flexibility. My sister and brother already live near here. They have families, but I have the most flexibility far as caretaking. And it was time for me to go home and
mhm,
spend some
mhm,
time with my family. I have not been home very much. I'm kind of like the wandering sibling who never comes home.
mhm, mhm,
Um, so yeah, so now I'm here on the Oregon coast. After I left Chicago, I kind of didn't want to go back to Santa Fe. At least not yet. I'm not ready. By the way, there's nowhere to live there anymore because everything's Airbnb and the
Yes.
locals are all struggling to find places to live. It's really turning into and then of course, Hollywood's moving there because they've opened all these giant production facilities,
Yeah.
shows. So people like me are getting priced out.
Mhm,
And I've
mhm,
often said, to people, because I house sat at the Gulf Coast before I came out to the Oregon coast, and even there, people are being priced out because all these rich people have bought second, third, fourth, fifth homes and turned them
mhm,
into Airbnbs. So the
mhm,
people there can't afford to live. I was in
mhm,
Eureka Springs in Arkansas visiting a friend, I think a year ago or 2 years ago. And I said to someone at a coffee shop, "Oh my gosh, this place is so cute. What does it look like to live here?" And she laughed and she said, "Good luck. Locals can't afford to live here anymore because everybody's come in and bought houses and
mhm,
turned them into Airbnbs." And I thought, to myself, oh my gosh, what's going to happen when there's nowhere for ordinary people to live anymore?
mhm,
And then I thought, and what does it mean that all these wealthy people are coming in, taking all the housing and everything else, and kind of confining all of their quote unquote servants, the people they expect them to serve them at restaurants, at coffee
mhm,
shops,
mhm, mhm,
at grocery stores, are confined or to these places way far away, and we have to drive an hour to get to work to serve them. I mean, what does that mean
mhm,
societally for us? Because
mhm.
that's the way it's heading.
Right.
All of these, the local people, the normal people who don't have great wealth, where are we going to be confined to these small spaces?
Mhm.
Because everyone else there's no place to live. Anyway, that's something I've been thinking about and struggling with this past year. Um, but all that to say, I'm on the Oregon coast now. I'm house sitting. I thought, you know what? After not working, being with my mother for that long, I thought I want to jump back in and work. So I'm working at the cutest restaurant, and it's very, very busy. Huge tourist spot. Everybody's there is so young and shiny and cute, and I've made some new friends, and it's been just a thoroughly fun job.
Yeah.
I never wanted to, I did the corporate route for a couple of years after college. And then I went to a corporate event and it was to salute everyone who'd been there 5, 10, 20, 30
Mhm,
years. And I
mhm,
was watching the screen and my stomach shriveled up and I just got this feeling of emptiness. And I thought, this cannot be my life. It was
mhm,
a watershed moment. And I told my boss, who happened to be a dear friend, the next day, I can't do that. This cannot be I have to go out and see the world and
mhm,
like
mhm,
actively participate in it. Like, I can't do this. And she understood. Uh,
mhm.
so that's the sign of a dear friend, everyone.
Yes, really. Yes, my husband just retired from 27 years of working at the city north of us. And he he did it because he started off doing graphics for the leisure services, just that one department. And he got to, build the pottery studio for the city. Well, about I can't remember how many years ago now, they decided that they wanted him at City Hall to do graphics for everybody. And oh my gosh, that was such a horrible thing for him because he didn't get to do the pottery studio anymore. And he's been grieving that ever since. Well, now that he's retired, he's thinking about going and taking some classes at the community college because, he could do the auditing thing. And he's a senior, so he can pay the senior price and get back into that. But yeah, it's he did it because of the retirement, that he was going to get, the state retirement that he was going to get. But yeah, that is kind of a soul killing thing. It can be. He found other ways, other outlets for himself, but yeah, I totally understand that. The Oregon coast though, we loved living in Oregon we lived there for 15 years right out of college. But then my both sets of parents lived in Arizona and they were getting older and my dad had heart disease. So we decided to move down here and we're the only ones left now here. Other siblings moved here for a short amount of times, but we're the only ones left now. So yeah, beautiful. I love the Oregon coast. It's gorgeous there. But yeah, I kind of get that wanderlust thing. Even though we've lived here for over 20 was but 28 years now, I think. But we have to go travel and go visit family or something periodically. So yeah, now I want to ask about your book. Didn't you write a book? You want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah. So I mean, yes, I am. Someone has asked me, okay, so you went to seminary, you got a master's of divinity. What are you? But you do all these other things. What are you? And,
Mhm.
I am ordained in the Church of Universal Interfaith because I will always be an interfaith minister.
Mhm.
But at my heart, I'm a creative. And it's
Mhm.
just been that way since I was a kid. I mean, I was
Mhm.
just a writer from the get go. And so among all my other projects, I'm rewriting the Peter Rabbit book series. And so basically, I've written the first three. So I've rewritten Peter Rabbit. It's called A Tale of Two Rabbits. The second one is a rewrite of Squirrel Nutkin. It's called The Nuts Guts. The third one is a rewrite of The Tailor of Gloucester. It's called Boom Chicka Meow Meow. And basically, it's a rewrite of, I'm just rewriting the series, but to more forcefully engage with what's going on in the world, like
Mhm.
environmental degradation, sweatshops, human trafficking, kind
Mhm.
of using that series as a kind of a platform to say, hey, everybody, you need to pay attention to what's happening. Please wake
Mhm.
up and pay attention because Beatrix Potter was subversive, like the things that her animals and her characters engaged with, very subversive,
Mhm.
very, you thought you were reading a kid's story, but there
Mhm.
were also deeper levels of meaning. And so I'm
Mhm.
just mining on that universe but making it more aggressive, you could say, because the in the old stories, Peter's father gets baked in a pie by Mr. McGregor. And so the cover of the first book has Peter's dad in a pie.
Mm.
He's skinned in a pie.
Mhm.
So it's meant to let you know that this is a different kind of series. This is a different kind
Mhm.
of take on Peter Rabbit.
Yeah, now is it illustrated? Are they illustrated?
Yes, I really wanted to showcase female illustrators. And
Mhm.
one of the overarching themes of the series is going to be, why do we keep making the same mistakes over and over? So that endless
Mhm.
circle of going back and making the same mistakes. And so I have three female illustrators. So book one is illustrated. That illustrator also illustrates book four. Book two illustrates book five. Book three illustrates book six.
Ah.
So inside the series, you're always returning to the illustrators that you've seen before. It's just a
Mhm.
conceit I'm using to kind of weave in the idea of you could say the eternal return. Like, why do we keep
Mhm.
making the same mistakes over and over?
Mhm. Oh man, when are we gonna break out of it? I hope we're breaking out of it now. But
Me too.
yeah, because man, the world is so chaotic right now.
It is.
And as a highly sensitive person, man, sometimes I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning and I can't go back to sleep because the energies are like so whacked.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, and I think as a highly sensitive person, you probably have a heavy heart a lot of the time. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
you can be in the world right now and
Mhm.
hear what's going on or witness what's going on or see people suffer or see people getting killed, kids getting
Mhm.
killed. You
Mhm.
can't be, if you're fully in this world and committed to it and
Mhm.
and willing to deeply be invested in the world, you cannot witness what's going on right now
I
and not
know.
have a sad heart. And our poor hearts, I mean, they're also trying to engage and deal with what's going on in our daily lives. So if you're highly sensitive and you're taking in
Mhm.
what's happening, our hearts can get very heavy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I mean, for years, I have not watched the news because when I was growing up, my dad wanted to know everything. And so he'd come home from work and we'd watch the news. Well, it was about, they would have live coverage from something that was going on in the Vietnam War or the civil rights, demonstrations or something. So it was like, just that growing up with all those demonstrations. And then we were watching TV before we went to church and saw Lee Harvey Oswald shot on live TV. And it was like, ugh, I just can't do that now. I can't do it. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes, right.
No
Uh
apologies needed. I don't watch the news either because I know, I mean, I can feel how toxic it is for me.
mhm.
It's
Mhm.
just, it
Mhm.
is, and it's no wonder that people are walking around half shut off, right? In our world,
Mhm.
in our society, you have to protect yourself. It's
Mhm.
almost like this innate response to daily trauma because people are
Mhm.
watching the news who are accessing traumatic things on the internet, which let's face it, there's a lot of trauma on the internet. You automatically start to shut parts of yourself off so that you can protect yourself.
Yeah,
So no wonder most of us are walking around
I
like
know.
zombies. We
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah. Well, and so I will read enough of the news or I will watch enough of the news to kind of keep up with what's happening. And if I need to, because I have a blog, if I want to comment on something on my blog, then I can do that. But it's not, yeah. I'm I'm like you. I'm curious too. So when I'm with people, I want to be curious about them and their lives and not think about all that other stuff that's going on, but just be focused on them personally and see if there's something that I can connect with them and maybe help them or maybe they can help me. But to connect in love with people. And curiosity is a great way to do that. So, yeah.
I mean, I think curiosity is a superpower. I mean, honestly.
Mhm.
And I was born with it. I mean, I've just been endlessly curious about the world.
Mhm.
I've told people that if I could be in school for the rest of my life, I would be and get 10 master's degrees. I
Mhm.
want to learn. And I've been that way since I was a kid. Some people are not born that way, they don't care.
Mhm. Right.
No. And so we're all different. I just
Mhm.
have a thirst for something different. My
Right.
addiction is for learning.
Right.
And so if you're curious, I think it's a superpower. It makes the world so much more delightful. It
Mhm.
makes waking up every day so much more delightful because you think, oh my gosh, what adventure am I going to have today?
Right.
What stranger is going to become my friend? I think there's a lot of hope just intrinsically inside curiosity
Mhm.
because I think you have a hopeful position towards the world.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it's just inside being curious. And I love that about myself.
I do too. I like that about myself too. Because I asked my brother to do a DNA test and then somebody said cuz I said I want you to do this DNA test because it it will help us find dad's line. And because of the Y chromosome, whatever it is, I've forgotten now what it is, but we needed that if we were going to trace his DNA line and my dad's DNA line. And somebody said to me, "How do you know that?" It was like, "Well, I watch science stuff. How do how come you don't know that?" It was like, I watch stuff about archaeology. I watch history stuff. I'm just curious. I want to know. I'm like, and I'm like my dad in that way. I don't read a whole lot of nonfiction books all the time, but I watch a lot of documentaries and, videos about history and I read historical novels and then I go research the, time period or whatever. So yeah, I'm like you. I just learning is fun. Learning is fun. Yeah.
For sure, 100%. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, right. So I mean, I think I must have looked at that person like with a kind of a, you know, maybe they took it as a judgmental face, but I was like, I don't understand how come you don't know that.
Oh, no.
But, yeah, because I was just shocked. I was shocked that they didn't know it. That, um and maybe, we're all different. So, we all have different interests. So, yeah. Do you have anything else you wanna say before we go? Because talk about your podcast. Talk about
Oh,
that.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think one of the things that I mean, I've been a lifelong bibliophile, and I don't know if you know this about me, but I got banned from the library when I was in junior high. Yeah, it's actually a really funny story. Do we have time for me to tell it?
Oh, yes. We have
Okay,
lots of
okay.
time.
Yeah, okay. So basically, came back to the States. It was traumatic for me. I didn't understand the world all of a sudden. The culture shock was horrific. And my parents were going through a really terrible divorce. And I think the judge at Kane County outside of Chicago said it was one of the worst he'd ever seen. It was just so terrible. And so home wasn't a respite. Combined that with the fact that my mother had mental health issues that she was really struggling through. And so all this happened. We come back to the States, thrust into a completely different culture for me. Divorce starts not long after that, maybe a year or two after we get back. My mother's having mental health issues. So I just start hiding in the library in junior high. And in general, I mean, I love reading. I'm a voracious reader, but I
Mm.
thought, oh my goodness, the library. And so I would go there during lunch. I would go there after school or whenever I could. I was in that library reading because all of a sudden, I didn't have to pay for books. There were like thousands of books and I could read everything I wanted.
Uh-huh.
And I was also, I mean, let's face it, I know that this now, but I was hiding from home. I was hiding from having to go home. I was terrified of everyone because I didn't know how to talk to people still. Uh,
Mhm.
I just wasn't making friends. I was just scared of the world. It was
Mhm.
just everything was so uncertain. And so I was in chemistry class one day. Oh, they also had a reading competition every year. So the first year I won in seventh grade, I read like 96 books. The second year I won in eighth grade, I read 120. So in eighth grade, I was in chemistry class. The guidance counselor comes in, says, or someone comes in and said, you need to go to the guidance counselor's office. And I thought, oh dear, I mean, what happened? And I walk in, there are both of my parents in the middle of the day and my guidance counselor. And I thought, okay, I totally got ambushed. And the guidance counselor
Mm.
basically told my parents, I don't know, ratted me out or whatever, but they said she's spending too much time in the library. She's not developing social skills. She's not developing socially. And so, what are we going to do about this? This is not normal. And, I was basically just a spectator. I didn't really have anything to say. I didn't even know this was happening. Um, and they three decided that I was to be banned from the library. I was no longer allowed to go to the library, and that I had to go to recess. I had to participate like a normal person.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
wasn't able to engage in what I loved. And I mean, I was sick to my stomach.
Oh, really?
And just thought to myself, I don't know what I'm going to do. And that next day, I was not allowed in the library. And at lunch, I had to go to recess with everyone else.
Mhm.
And it was
Mhm.
winter, so it was inside at the gym. And I remember walking in. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know who to talk to. I was just terrified. And I looked over, and these three they were wonderful African American girls. I'll never forget this. They were on the side of the gym. I don't know if they didn't have friends either or what have you, but they were the three people of color in my school, and they took me in, and I became friends with them. And they talked to me. And the thing that I always tell everyone, because my father still apologizes for, he sees my peripatetic lifestyle as a failure. I mean, my family does. They don't understand me, and that's okay. I've had the life that I've wanted, not the one they've wanted for me. And so my father still says to me, I am why did we ban you from the library? Think of what you could have become if we'd allowed you to do what you wanted. And I thought, oh my God, Dad. I mean, I'm happy. I'm living the life that I want. And I mean, this banning from the library I see is very fortuitous. It was very apocryphal almost, because when I graduated from 8th grade, I was nominated class bookworm, of course. And then when I graduated from high school, I was nominated class clown. And if that isn't a complete pivot in me and finding some part of myself that I had no idea existed. And I've said to him, look, Dad, you changed my life for the better. Like at the time, yes, I couldn't understand it. It gutted me. Yes. Yes. But you also opened me up to something that has changed me forever. And, with being banned from the library, if I would have stayed in that library, I don't know, would I have a podcast? Would I be able to write comedy? Would I be able to do all these things? No. And so it's kind of part of my story that this had to happen. And so my podcast came about because of the pandemic. And I graduated from seminary in the middle of the pandemic. So no jobs anywhere. And so many people were lonely and sad and isolated and thinking, what is the world? What is happening in the world? And I thought, everybody's always coming to me and telling me these strange stories that they can't explain that are happening in their lives. And I like those stories, but maybe these stories will make other people happy. And so I don't get paid for this. It's altruistic. I think this week I'm releasing episode 191 or 192. It's called Bite-Sized Blessings. So BYTE, because I love science as well. And it's my homage to uniting science and spirituality. So Bite-Sized Blessings, each episode has the longer form interview or the short incident of the bite. And basically I've had everyone under the sun, atheists, religious people, Baha'i, Mormon, people who are spiritual but not religious. And I ask them, have you ever witnessed or experienced something that you consider to be magical or miraculous? And how did it change your life? And gosh, I've had everything from ghosts to fairies to mothers who changed people's lives, people who someone who died 3 times and came back. I mean, I just can't even tell you the stories that these human beings have told me. Some of them just make my jaw drop. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, there is something happening here in this universe, in this reality, in this world that we cannot adequately engage with yet. And that mainstream science says, oh, as they pat us on our heads, you're just imagining, or, oh, that was just a dream, or, oh, you were near death, so your chemicals in your brain were going crazy. Oh, little child, you don't really know what you're talking about. You have an active imagination. But for so many people, these experiences form the bedrock upon which they operate the rest of their lives. And I'm sorry, but I love mainstream science. I love what it's teaching me, what I can learn from it, but they're missing the boat on all of this other ephemeral and kind of just strange and otherworldly stuff that's happening with so many people.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I love Greg Braden. I mean, the first book we read of his was Awakening to Zero Point, which I think he rewrote as Fractal Time. And he is a scientist, but he marries spirituality and science. So that's one of the things I really like about him. And yeah, the pandemic was when I started my podcast too. And of course, my whole ever since I did theater, I got a master's in theater, then I taught drama. I got a master's in education, taught drama, taught theater at the college. And so for me, it was all about stories. Everything was about stories. But see, there are stories in science, there are stories in history, there are stories in everything. And so I don't get paid for my podcast either. But yeah, amazing. It's so great to talk to these amazing people like you. So yeah, I totally understand that whole podcast love of podcasting thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have friends everywhere now, all over the world, just from doing
Mhm.
podcasts, and
Mhm.
it's been such an unexpected gift. I did
Mhm.
not think that this would happen,
Mhm.
and I have formed some really dear friendships with people, and it's been so beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. It is beautiful. Yeah. So now I'll ask again. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Oh no, just that going back to me doing the podcast that we were literally just talking about and all of these friendships all over the world, one of the things that it has caused me to reflect on is that we need more connection and we need
Mhm.
more community and we need, because I've interviewed people on my podcast that I certainly probably don't agree with
Mhm.
entirely, but we are able to sit down and have a conversation and learn from each other and make a new
Mhm.
friend,
Mhm.
understand that the quote unquote other isn't so scary and isn't a demon and isn't like
Mhm.
this really scary thing. And that's been another unexpected kind of gift or blessing from this
Mhm.
whole enterprise of my podcast is
Right.
just understanding that we need more connection.
Mhm.
These people I'm interviewing, these people I'm meeting, I'm forming a web of community all over the
Mhm.
world. And we need more of that now.
We
Because
do.
it's so easy to say, oh, that person's this person's that. No,
Mhm.
sit down with them. Sit
Yeah.
down, have a conversation, and I'm sure you'll find something that you
Mhm.
can respect or even love about that person. And so, yeah,
Yes.
I'd like to go out with that little note.
Oh, good. Yes. Yeah, because we need to break outside of our little shells. And yeah, connection. That's such a great. I love that. I love that. Because that's why I do my podcast.
Me too.
Uh,
Me too. I always talk about, the sandbox from my childhood. And when I was a kid, everybody jumped in the sandbox overseas,
mhm.
every kind of kid. And so psychologically, I'm endlessly this is a very deep secret, trying to recreate the sandbox from my
Mhm.
childhood. And I'm always like, come on in and jump into the sandbox I've created. The more, the merrier. Let's have
Right.
fun. Let's create something together. And what does
Mhm.
that look like? What does it look like? Let's just have fun doing it. So yeah, now you
Mhm.
know a deep dark secret of mine.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, moving so much for me was a little bit like that because, it was like I got to I'm an observer. So sit back, observe the new lay of the land in the new place. And then I can fit in here or I can fit in here. I can fit in here. Yeah. So that's I love that. Yeah. Let's create a big sandbox where everybody can fit.
Feel.
Yes, yes, right. Oh, thank you so much for being my guest. I've had so much fun.
I'm so glad that we could finally make it happen. And I'm so glad that, I had COVID because this feels like the perfect time for us to talk.
Yes, because it's even worse than it was back then.
No.
I'm laughing, but it's sad.
Yes. True story. True story.
Sad, but I'm laughing. I'm envious that you're on the Oregon coast, but we're going up to the Pacific Northwest because my sister lives in the Seattle area. So
Oh,
in about a
yay.
in about a month. Yeah, my mom died in February, and we have some more things we have to do to take care of.
Gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess I'm sad that she's gone because I can't talk to her anymore, but she was 91 and we got to have this really great 90th birthday party for her on the Oregon coast, which is where she wanted to go. And the whole family came. It was this big family reunion thing, and it was so fun. And then from it was like she was kind of done, and she
Mhm.
started to decline after that. And my dad's been dead for 20 years this year, 20 years. And I think she was just ready to go be with him, you know.
Yeah.
And he all of his siblings are gone now. All of her sister died some years back. So yeah, she was just kind of ready to go be with them, you know.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, yay. Fun for her," you know? But I look at death a little bit differently than most people. It's like, well, they're still around. I can still talk to
Right.
them.
Absolutely. Yes, and believe me, after all the stories I've heard on my podcast, I know that they're around.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, right. So thank you again. I've said thank you once already, but thank you again. And I hope we get to continue talking.
Me too. Yay.
Kirsten lived in various places around the world. And one of the things she learned from that was that people's hopes and dreams and fears and phobias are pretty universal. And my sister Celeste and I believe that movies have that same kind of thing that you can learn is that human beings, hopes, fears, dreams, the love they feel, the stresses that they feel are pretty universal. And so that's why we started the YouTube channel Classic Cinema with the Sage Sisters. And we hope that you will come and join us for each conversation that we have about the movie of each episode. You can find us on Classic Cinema with the Sage Sisters on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a rating and/or review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. I invite you to join my Patreon community at patreon.com/storypower, all one word. Or if you like, you can subscribe to Story Power on Apple Podcasts. It's my aim to build a community where we discuss the stories we love and talk about what we learned from them. I offer extra audio content and story suggestions to my patrons on both platforms. Remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Let's spread the story love. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.